Okay, welcome to the show. I'm your host, Ron Stevens. This is Rock the Boat right here on Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. I'm your host for the next 2 hours. It's Easter, Bunny Day, and it's also Bilderberg Day. I figure I'm going to do a piece on Bilderberg today because, well, Bunny and Bilderberg start with a B. And there ain't much I can say about the Easter Bunny, so we'll deal with the history of Canadian involvement with the Bilderberg Group. And it's quite ugly, actually. But it's also something people need to understand. What I find most Canadians don't understand is anything about their own damn country. And I would think that goes for Americans too. And that's not by accident. That is by design. Because how are they ever going to manipulate a well-informed public? And therein lies the problem. Because the public don't generally have a clue. And that, any way you cut it, is dangerous. I'm getting feedback. Oh, I know why. So I'm just going to get set up here in the chats, and then we'll get on with this. My wife found a GIF. I never use these things. I don't like all this silliness, but she did come across a GIF that somebody made an alarm clock. And they have a rubber hand attached and beats the hell out of this girl. And this is not anti-girl or telling people to beat their ladies, because if I ever catch you beating your lady and I know where you are, I'll come beat the living snot out of you. Any man that would hit a woman, well, he ain't a man. I would like better if it was a guy, but the GIF has a girl in it who's sleeping, and this hand comes down and starts whacking her on the head repeatedly. And I thought that was a good alarm clock that should be sent to all your friends and family who refuse to wake to the tyranny that's beating on our doors. Simple as that. So I'm just going to get into the chat here, and then we'll go. Here we are. So we're coming to you live on Studio B, freedomslips.com, Revolution Radio, and it's also being simulcast over to ucy.tv. So there's a chat in either, whichever makes you happier. Go there, pass it around to your friends and family, and very important we wake these people up. It's our duty. We don't have a choice in the matter. So I'm just going to stick my Facebook, which I'm in jail most of the time, but today I seem to be out of jail, which is okay with me. Throw that in the chats. I put the last post I put in, I just put in before showtime here, which is this GIF of this hand slapping this girl in the head. And below that, though, the next post down is a little history, and it's really sad, that the people don't know anything. Because if we did know, well, I know, and more people know every day, but the general public is still fast asleep. So I just put this piece in here, which should kind of rock anybody's boat. Okay, so we'll just read this real quick, and then I'll stick it in the chats, and we'll get on with the show. Canada was a founding member of the League of Nations. Now, I saw one article where they put down President Wilson as the founder of the League of Nations. Now, I do know that Wilson was paramount in the establishment of the Fed, and that he was basically their butt boy, and he ran around desperately trying to get America to sign on to the League of Nations, but because they still had a memory bank that existed and worked, Americans refused to sign on to the League of Nations because it required them giving up some of their sovereignty. And they still understood why they fought the War of Independence, and the idea of giving up any sovereignty was not palatable to the American people. And it was after that they ramped up the public school system. The public school system is to rearrange your memory bank. And, and this is one thing I wish people would understand, is memory bank idea, because you see, the older generations remembered why they fought the War of Independence, but when the public school system pops up, the idea is to eradicate all of that history, okay, make it non-important, make the idea of creation unimportant, and push the evolution and the humanism stories, okay? But when a little kid goes to school, he don't know nothing, okay? They don't know nothing. So they can fill their heads whatever they want. And as they busted up the families, there's no connection left anymore. And the state gets the children, and they produce what they want in order to take down the nation. And most of these people that are taking down the nations aren't even aware of it. It's really quite sad. Anyways, so the League of Nations, an organization of countries established in 1919 at the end of the First World War. It was replaced by the United Nations at the end of the Second World War. And again, Wilson was warning the American people that if they didn't sign on to the League of Nations, there was going to be another major war in the not too distant future. Now, the question is, how would he know that? Well, simple, because the boys that he was bowing down to, the ones that created the Fed, the money boys, and the internationalists, told him, hey, Wilson, get this signed, because if you don't get it signed, okay, we're going to crack it again. You know? And after the Second World War and some hard public school system propaganda, America signed on to the United Nations. Anyways, for the push for world government and end of nation states began a long time ago, and Canada became involved in this early on. The CIC, the Canadian International Council, has its roots way back in 1928 as the Canadian Institute of International Affairs. Now, I put a link in there, and I wish everyone would go and hit the link and go read it. The CIC's digital media platform is called OpenCanada.org, is Canada's hub for international affairs. Okay? Open Canada, right? Which is your borders, which is the downfall of your nation, which is the internationalization, the globalization of your nation. Now, it's really wild here. If you go and you go to the Canadian International Council link at Wikipedia and read that, hopefully it opens your eyes a little bit. This is not something you see in the news, but it's there. And like I said, they write everything down. They tell you every damn thing they're up to. Always. But nobody ever reads it. You just keep looking at these dumbass politicians that they stick up in the puppet window to entertain you. You know, I was talking to a guy this morning when I went up to get a coffee, and he's probably older than me, and which is getting on old as dirt. But, you know, he wasn't going to vote for Kathleen Wynne, the Liberal, in this election coming up. Well, granted. So he says he's gonna vote for Doug Ford, the Conservative. But he doesn't know anything about Doug Ford. Hasn't got a clue who Doug Ford is, what Doug Ford's up to, who's pulling his puppet strings. And why are people going to vote Conservative? Because they're mad at the Liberals. And why did they vote Liberal? Because they were mad at the Conservatives. And before that, they voted Conservative because they were mad at the NDP. And before that, they voted NDP because they were mad at the Liberals and the Conservatives. And all this time flies by and nobody seems to have a freaking clue. They just do what they do out of anger, not out of knowledge. Anger is not power, although anger can be a motivator. Knowledge is power. Ignorance is not bliss. Ignorance is dangerous. And we have to educate, get some usable knowledge, some background history into our people's brains. Anyways, the CIC's major fundraiser is its annual gala dinner, where the Globalist of the Year award is presented. Now, we're in Canada, and this is the Canadian International Council, who raises money at a dinner, and at that dinner, they hand out the Globalist of the Year award, not the Canadian of the Year, but the Globalist of the Year award is presented. Now, if you go to the link, there's a bunch of other people that have been awarded, but this guy here is present and involved, so I just put this in. One of the past recipients of the Globalist of the Year award is George Soros, who was given the Globalist of the Year award at one of these dinners in Canada. Chairman of Soros Fund Management and founder and chairman of the Open Society Institute. Now, he got that award back in 2010. That was the same year, for all you conservatives out there, that was the same year, 2010, was when the G20 was held in Toronto. And at that G20 meeting, at a media scrum, the Prime Minister of Canada, which is a corporation, so he's the CEO of the corporation, stated at a media scrum, it's not like you flipped it out somewhere and somebody caught it. It was at a media scrum. And it was never presented to the public in the media. But what he said was, this is a loss of Canadian, national sovereignty. Some people don't like it, but it's a simple reality. That's the same year that George Soros was given the Globalist of the Year award by the Canadian International Council, which was started way back in 1928 under the name of the Canadian Institute of International Affairs. So, bitching about Trudeau or thinking another politician another politician will save us will do nothing to stem the destruction of our nature. The Trojan horse, our nation, the Trojan horse arrived many decades ago. The future of our nation, children and grandchildren, those not yet born, is in our hands. Now, the globalists, you know, the UN logo in that, they have the hands holding the globe, and they call it in our hands. Well, we don't want our nation in their hands. We want it in our hands. Because if we let it go much further, well, you're not going to be very happy at the destination they have us scheduled to arrive at. Only we can make the necessary changes to ensure the future of our nation. Period. And that's the decision that we're going to have to come to. We're going to have to grow up. You know, the whole point of the public school system and the political system is to keep you in a childlike state. And they've done an extraordinarily good job of it. You know, I can't, give them too hard a time on their ability. I mean, they put the program forward. They've deceived the living hell out of everybody and kept everybody in a childlike position so they can do what they want with you. Then they've been doing what they want with you for a very, very, very long time. Time to, grow up, stand up, put your foot down, say no, give them the middle finger, shove off, we're done with you. And deal with our own nation, which shouldn't be too difficult because, we have more resources per capita than anywhere else on the planet. We've got the second largest landmass on the planet. We've got an extremely small population. We shove off. I mean, we can cut the whole damn world loose and there'd be no poverty. There'd be no homelessness. There'd be no stress. They're destroying the very fabric of your essence. But you just still act like children and get mad at politicians. It ain't the politicians, it's us. It's us. We're the problem. But then we're also the solution. And we better come to terms with that ASAP. So, I'm going to shove this, my Facebook into the chats here. And what's cooking here? Let me see. Get rid of that. Do this. Anyways, I was wishing everybody the happiest of Easter. Now I don't know if the government did this or somebody else did it, but apparently all of the what is with this stupid thing? Apparently all of the lottery machines are down, which is kind of weird because, I don't know if it's because it's April Fool's that the government's playing a joke on the people. But I'm not real pleased with people who are always buying lottery tickets because all they're doing, what the hell? I can't even post into the chats today. What the hell is going on? It keeps hitting reconnect. What the hell is going on here? Oh, for crying out loud. All right. I'm not a happy camper right now. Anyways, my Facebook is called Rock the Boat Radio. It just keeps reconnecting all the time, or hitting reconnect, and it doesn't give me time to post anything. Run is being denied. Apparently, we'll see if we can't work it out. I might have to start a different browser and see if I can work it from there. Anyways, this is really weird because I go out for get a coffee in the morning, and this morning, the lottery machines are all down. And this really boggles the mind, because, at least my mind, because when I go to get a coffee, about, I would say, 90+% of the people that come to the counter are buying lottery tickets, which is just a tax. Right? Everybody's bitching about all the taxes they're paying, and they go buy all these lottery tickets, which is nothing more than a tax. But what really got me this morning is the machines are all down. So you can buy a scratch ticket, of which some people were excited about, because when they heard the machines were down, they all looked depressed. But then when they found out they could still buy scratch tickets, they got all happy. Talking about being held in the child position, for crying out loud. But, when I was getting my coffee, the girl at the counter, she says, "Oh, he's back. He was here about an hour and a half ago." And I told him that now this is Easter Sunday, for crying out loud. So he was there about an hour and a half before to check his tickets. The machines are down. Now he's back to see if the machines are up. Like, you got nothing better to do with your life. We're outside having a smoke. Guy pulls up in a car. He's got a lottery ticket in his hand. And the girl goes, "Sorry, the machines are down." Damn. And then he goes, "I already checked it on the computer, but it said I didn't win." Okay, so you checked it on the computer. The computer said you didn't win, but you're coming here to make sure you didn't win. I mean, and then there was, just when I was leaving, there was a couple who came in, and they'd already been to a gas station and another corner store to check their tickets, and they were both told at both places that the machines were all down. So they drive across town and end up at the little coffee store I go to see if the machines are down there. I mean, is this all we got to do in Canada, is run around buying and checking lottery tickets? No wonder we're getting taken down. We're completely oblivious to anything that's going on around us, except their stupid lottery tickets. It's like a sickness or something. It's really, I just don't get it, because, I mean, your odds on winning the big one are probably, I think they're like 14 million to 1. Okay? It's like getting struck by lightning twice. Same odds. But every day, these same people in every town across this nation are lined up like a bunch of freaking lottery zombies, hoping for the big one. Well, you just keep on hoping, folks. It just makes no sense whatsoever. None. Yeah, I'm gonna have to try different. So I want to get some stuff in here today. Okay, so if you do go, if you are listening or whatever, just go to Rock the Boat Radio and check out this alarm clock. I mean, I really would like to see, because I hear people all the time complaining about, they're starting to get it now. They're waking up, but when they try to explain to their family what's going on, the family just doesn't want to hear about it. And I mean, everybody's experienced that. Just trying to wake people up. So, send them that picture of the alarm clock. I mean, it's oh, there's a good researcher. I'm sorry, I just got a Skype from. We're working on something, and I saw the word bingo come up. I'm not going to discuss that on the show right now, but puts a big smile on my face. Anyways, I guess we should travel over to Bilderberg. And if this for some oddball reason, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the blockers. Who knows? But I can't put nothing in the chats for some oddball reason. So I'll open a new browser later. Anyways, we'll go back here. Now, the history of the Bilderberg meetings. The first meeting was the 29th and 31st of May, 1954. So that was before I was even born, because I wasn't born until September of 1954, and I'm 63 freaking years old. So this particular group's been going for 63 years and a half, and almost 64 years in a month or a couple months. 64 years. This group has been working away at setting up the world government. Now, it was Warburg, Paul, I believe it was, who at the 1950 Senate hearing in the United States stated specifically that there will be a world government by consent or by conquest. And it's been rolling along ever since. But they can't conquest us here in the West. It won't fly. I don't care how they try to spin it in the media. They can't spin it. So the job here is to get you to consent. And that's what they've been doing for so many decades. I just have to okay, this is getting to be good news on the other end. But anyway, so this has been going on for 64 years. Warburg said it in 1950. Wilson was running around after the First World War telling people we're going to get a Second World War if we don't do as we're told. And American people didn't do as they were told, and we got a Second World War. So this has been going on for an extremely long time. Now, I got to get this particular piece into the chat somehow, because this goes from, I don't even know where it ends up at. I was just going through it here. I don't know if it comes all, I don't know what year it ends at, this one. So I only got up to 60 something. Let me see where we're at here. 1999. So this is a pretty good history, and it's hard to get the listings. You'll see it for certain years, but this particular has from 54 from the first. Let's see, this is 2011. See where this ends up at here. 20. Okay, it goes up to 2013. So that's pretty good history. In fact, I wonder. Anyways, we have President, His Royal Highness the Prince of the Netherlands, and we have a list of all of these people here. Rapporteur George W. Ball, a USA lawyer. George Barry Bingham, U.S. newspaper publisher, chief of mission to France, Economic Cooperation Administration, members of Parliament from different countries, and President of Foreign Service Educational Foundation from the U.S., David Rockefeller, of course, U.S. banker, Senior Vice President, Chase National Bank. This is 1954, folks. Zellerbach, J.D. Zellerbach, U.S. industrialist, member of U.S. Delegation General Assembly of the United Nations, 1953. Chief ECA Special Mission to Italy. And there's a long list of here bankers, parliamentarians, internationalists, and industrialists. And this is what people need to go through. It doesn't matter who's running your county. It doesn't matter who's running your state. If you ain't got any history, you got nothing. All you're doing is reacting to the puppet show that's being presented to you at any given time. So when we go through here, the first one, give you travel, give where they're staying and all this kind of nonsense. And it gives you a list of the participants. And the first one, in 1954, we basically have the U.S., Germany, Netherlands, Switzerland, Norway, Belgium. So it's basically Europe, except for the U.S. Okay, so it's basically Europe and the Nordic countries in the first one. And I'm just doing what I'm doing here because, and I would expect you to do the same thing. So in 1955, it was held in France. And this is when we come across the first Canadian, Pierre Dupuy. Dupuy. Now, who the hell is this guy? This is 1955. You know, who is the guy? Why is he there? And he made several appearances over a fairly long period of time. So the beauty of this, when you go through these names, and this is all I did, and I got up to, I don't know what year I got to, but Who are these people? Like, what the hell are they up to? So his diplomatic career, in 22, he joined the Department of External Affairs, working in Paris as a secretary for the office of then Canadian Commissioner General. When in 28, 28 is the same year that the Canadian International Institute, or whatever it was called, I was talking about earlier, was formed. That office became a formal legation. He was promoted to second secretary, and then in 38 to first secretary. During World War II, Canada, unlike Britain, did not break off its diplomatic relations with the Vichy regime in France. The ambassador, Georges Vanier, fled to London, but technically he was still accredited with the French government. Dupuy became the head of affairs for the Canadian legations to France, Belgium, and the Netherlands. So this goes on, and this is something that I found very interesting, is that in 63, let's see, in 63, he was named Commissioner General of Expo 67. He was responsible for getting foreign nations to participate in Expo. On April 27, 1967, Expo 67 opened on time and with the largest number of foreign nations participating in a World's Fair to that time. A testament to his persistence and skills as a diplomat and manager, Dupuy wrote a poem that was read at the opening by Laurence Olivier and Jean-Louis Barnot. Now, on December the 22nd, 1967, he was appointed to the Order of Canada. Now, this is something that people don't seem to understand about the Order of Canada. Okay, if you're not a player, you're not getting in the Order of Canada. Okay, if you are not moving the globalists program forward, you're not going to be in the Order of Canada. Okay, it's an order. It's a special group. That you and I are not privy to, part of, or anything else, okay? We're just simply the pawns. Now, what I found interesting about 1967 Expo, I think it was 12 at the time, and I grew up in Renfrew, Ontario, which is only 70 miles from Ottawa, or not from Ottawa, but I forget how far, it wasn't that big a drive to Montreal, a few hours. And so we went on the bus to Expo 67. And, we had the monorails running around. We had the geodesic domes. We had all of the different, what do you call them, pavilions from all over Hell's Half Acre. When I think about it, 67, and then in 72, now this is from, this guy was at Bilderberg several times for a reason. He was helping to get done what needed to be done, and that it was, Expo 67, like all World's Fairs, pushing for a world order, the bringing together of. And Rockefeller has been on all those meetings. And Rockefeller and Morris Strong hooked up. And Morris Strong was in charge of setting up the 1972 conference on the human environment. And it's not really just the same as Expo 67, okay? This guy was credited with bringing together the largest number of foreign countries to a World's Fair. Maurice Strong's job was to bring the leaders of as many nations as possible to the 72 Stockholm Conference on the Human Environment. Okay, this is all using suggestion to get you to basically submit to their plans. So that's the first guy that was in 1954 who, after the war, was doing his duty. Now, who was the only guy from Canada in 54, and I don't think anybody went back to Bilderberg. This is mostly Europe, right, except for the United States. It's basically a European move, okay, and this is really to bring the European countries together into the European Union. Okay, that's basically what this was all about. So, but there's lots of people in here from the United States, which I would really like the people from the United States to go through some of these names and find out who they are. Here's a guy that I never even looked up. I missed this guy. This is from 50... What year is this from? 55. Okay, I thought we didn't have anybody there in 55, but I do see one. Oh, actually, I see two. Let's see. I guess it was 56 or 57. We didn't have anybody there. Let's see if I got this guy up. This is actually absolutely amazing. I may have screwed this up a little bit. I was just looking at this last night. And there's some books that are really connected to this stuff too. After the war, the USSR was an ally during the war. But after the war, and they're just playing their part. Everybody, we had supply routes through Iran. All the allies did, and with the agreement that after the war they would pull out. Only USSR didn't, and that gave pause to show the worth of the United Nations as all of the countries coming together to jump on Russia or USSR for not pulling out. All game, all the time. So Russia went from being an ally to not being an ally, and thus started the Cold War. But I'm rooting around here. James S. Duncan, Canada, is one of the Bilderberg people that I looked up. 55, somewhere in there, 56. And we have a book here called Canada in the Soviet Mirror, Ideology and Perception in Soviet Foreign Affairs. Now, the whole plan, and this goes back to the 50s, the whole plan of and you can find this all through the Reece Commission. The plan, according to the Ford Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, Carnegie Foundation, these are the big foundations at the beginning, but there's hordes of the damn things these days, shuffling money off to NGOs and that to write papers for them, to basically cause the reaction to the problems that the foundations in the United Nations come up with that need global solutions. And the NGOs are there basically getting paid to cause a reaction that the media picks up on purpose, because it's just a big play. But this particular book, Canada in the Soviet Mirror ideology, and the plan was and is the Sovietization of America. Okay, that's where the foundations were, but it's the Sovietization of the West in general. And James S. Duncan was president and chairman of Massey Harris Ferguson Limited, spent a lot of time in the Soviet Union. And I'm not going to go through all of this stuff right now, but there's some pretty interesting reading in here. But people don't want to, I don't know, they just don't read. You know, they just don't bloody well read. But this is all about tying the nations together and building this huge bureaucracy of which we're under now, where the politicians, each group of politicians comes in and builds new bureaucracies that are made in such a way that they're arm's length from the government. So once they're created, it becomes very, very difficult to dismantle these things because it's all set up by the international lawyers. Now, as we go through this, let's see. That's that guy. That's that guy. Oh, yes. Fraser. Who is this guy? I think this Fraser W. Bruce W. Fraser, whatever it was, he was the head of Alcan. Started Alcan way back, and I'm sure there's some extraordinary, interesting stories about that guy. But what you find is that these guys all seem to end up, or the vast, vast majority of them all seem to end up where? The Order of Canada. And some of them ended up like Arnold Heaney, Arnold Danforth Patrick Haney, 1902 to 1970, was a Canadian lawyer, diplomat, and civil servant. Born in Montreal, yada, yada, yada. And he went to Oxford. Now, Oxford, when I looked into Oxford University, that's like Marxism. I mean, the particular school, there's a whole bunch of Oxford schools, and the particular Oxford school that Bob Ray / Cohen went to was attended by a bunch of globalists. And they had, I think her name was Rosa Rosenberg, was their turtle, mascot turtle at that school was named after. It was a Marxist. And he also has a Bachelor of Civil Law degree at McGill University, specializing in maritime law. He joined the Montreal law firm, yada, yada, yada. In 1938, he took the position of Principal Secretary to Prime Minister William Lyon Mackenzie King. From 40 to 49, he was Clerk of the Privy Council and Secretary to Cabinet. He was perhaps the most important civil servant during World War II. In 49, he became Under-Secretary of State for External Affairs and Ambassador to the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. He was Canada's ambassador to the United States from 53 to 57 and 59 to 62. In 68, he was made a Companion of the Order of Canada. All part, or as George Carlin would say, it's a big club. And, same club they use to beat you over the head every day, make you submit and all this kind of stuff. But you and I aren't in the big club. And that's absolutely correct. We're not in the big club. We're being clubbed by the big club and have been since the beginning of the nations here in the West. Our forefathers had great hopes for the future. And they did the best due diligence they could, but over time, through deception and benefits, the offering of benefits, slowly, the foxes, the weasels, and the snakes took control of our new house, our new home. And this is where we end up today. Who's next on this list? These are just some of the names from Canada that I dug out. Dana L. Wilgress, was born 1892, died in 1969, was a Canadian diplomat, born in Vancouver. Educated in Vancouver, Yokohama, Japan, Victoria, and McGill University. That's the other thing. You will see a huge number of these people ended up somewhere along the line, either at Oxford, McGill, or both. Okay, the history of McGill University is pretty dirty. Let's see, he was a junior trade commissioner in 1914, trade commissioner in Russia in 1916, trade commissioner in Vladivostok, I don't know where the hell that is, probably Russia, or somewhere in that neck of the woods in 1918. In early 22, he was trade commissioner in Hamburg, Germany. He became director of Commerce Intelligence Service in Ottawa in 1932. He was advisor at the Ottawa Imperial Conference in 1932. An advisor at World Economic Conference in London in 1933, a negotiator in Washington for Canada-U.S. trade agreement in 1936-38. He was appointed minister to the USSR for the period 42-43. He was Canadian ambassador to USSR from 1944 to 1946 and High Commissioner to London from 49 to 52. From 52 to 53, he was Undersecretary of State for the External Affairs and Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs. He was ambassador and permanent representative to the North Atlantic Council of NATO from 53 to 58. And representative to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development from 53 to 58. In 53, he received a Doctorate of Laws honors from University of British Columbia. In 67, he was made what? What was he made? A Companion of the Order of Canada, one of the boys in the club. And he died in 69. And I think we're going into a break here. So I'm going to jump out for a few minutes and go and have my Easter smoke. And then we'll come back. And I'm going to continue this a bit. If somebody wants to discuss it, call in. If you don't, I'm just going to keep rattling away. I may bring a caller in. I met a gentleman called Duncan McTavish, and he I think, has a few things he wouldn't mind discussing, but we'll see if we get him in or not. Lucky for me, Duncan McTavish is not part of the Order of Canada. So I believe I'm not hearing the in and out music for some oddball reason, but then I can't post in the chats either for some oddball reason. But I do believe we go to break at 12:56, which it says it is now. So I'm just going to mute up, go have my smoke, and then I shall return. So you're listening to Rock the Boat right here on freedomslips.com, Revolution Radio, being also sent over to ucy.tv. And we'll continue with the second hour in a few minutes. Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Ron Stevens. This is Rock the Boat here on freedomslips.com, which is Revolution Radio, and also being simulcast over to UCY.tv. Now, I really don't, I like both these networks. I thank them both for giving me the time they do. But again, these networks are listener funded. Now, while the globalists who create whatever amount of money they want, steal whatever amount of money they want from you, and use that money to further aspirations to destroy your nation, these networks depend on the listeners. And they're running on shoestring budgets. And like I keep saying, it's vitally important that these networks stay on the air. And therefore, it is imperative that you reach into your pocket and donate. You'll find donate buttons and hit it, and whatever you can afford, please donate it. It has to get done. These have to stay on the air. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. There's one of the voices that or these networks allow us to bring you knowledge that is required if we have any intention whatsoever of beating back these evil globalists from our nations. And only by doing so are your offspring going to have any hope in hell of having a future. So, yeah, it's extremely important that if you're on Ontario, Canada, you can't even buy a lottery ticket today. So why not use some of that lottery money, and instead of worrying about the damn lottery booths being open, why not take that money that you would have just pissed out the window, which is actually money that goes to the government, which helps to take us down. Take that money and go find a donate button on either of these networks and donate it. Vitally important that that's what happens. So, open a new browser here. I'm going to see if I can't stuff some links in here. Okay, where the hell did that go? See if we can do this. We're going to try. Okay, looks like this browser is going to let me work it. Okay, now that we got that, where's my other browser? I'll go get a link to, this is the most extensive Bilderberg list that I've come across. So I'm going to put it in the chats. And, wherever country you're from, right? Go through some of these names. Don't just go down and say, there's Ralphie Flanders from the United States, or John H. Ferguson from the United States, or from whatever country you're from. That's not what this is about. This is a research tool. You need to find out who these people are, what they're attached to, what they were up to, Otherwise, you're not getting any information. Now, as you go through it, you can't help but understand what's been going on. And the whole thing is about asking questions. Okay? If you don't ask any questions, if you don't say, who the hell was this guy? What was he up to? Why was he at Bilderberg? Where was he from? What do you do? What he's attached to? If you don't take the time to ask those questions, then you ain't going to go look for an answer. And if you don't go look for an answer, well, you're going to just remain ignorant. And that ain't bliss, trust me. Okay? It's about gaining knowledge, expanding your thought processes. Because as you go through these names and through these links, and again, all information on Wikipedia is not 100%. But the beauty of Wikipedia, or Wikipedia, is that it's full of links. So you can move around quickly to different places. Once you find out who this guy's attached to, you can go and put that into a search engine, and you may come up with some of these online books, which open up exactly where that guy's name is involved in the book, or her name is involved in the book. So it makes the research a whole lot simpler, quicker. But the important part is that you ask the question. If you don't ask the question, then you don't have any desire to go find an answer, which means you don't gain any knowledge. And knowledge is key. Because the time's coming when we're going to have to rise up, not violently, but just rise up, put our foot down, say, we get it, enough is enough. The answer is no, you ain't moving another step forward. We're backing you out of here, and that's that. We're taking our nation back. Hit the road, Jack, and don't you ever come back. No more, no more. Can it be done? Of course it can be done. And we can rectify the problem quicker than they incrementally got us into it. That's the beauty. Once the general population, and we don't need the entirety, what is, let me see, 30% of the American population is what, around 90 million people? I mean, we got it done. It's done. Okay, 3%, it's done. Okay, so don't worry about those who are absolutely bound on hugging the lie. Don't worry about them. Okay, we have a lot of deprogramming to do, and we're going to get it done because we simply don't have an option. Yeah, that's what I'm wondering. Your ad block. Yeah, I got this new, opened up a different browser with different blockers on it, so it seems to let me post into here, and now I got to go and open up Revolution and see if I can post in there. Which would be nice if it lets me. If I get too much of this stuff open, I'm likely going to get crashed down here. I have to be careful. There's days, there's so much junk flying around in computer land today. You got to have all these blockers. You got to have all these cleaners. You got to have all these spyware, malware, garbage going on that it makes it difficult. I think my computers ran better when I was on Windows 98 with 8 megs of RAM. Couldn't watch videos, and it took a long time to download this was when our internet speed was ridiculously slow, but had a lot less computer problems than I seem to be having today. Okay, finally, we got Revolution Radio chat open, so I'll put that in there. And I really encourage people, I can't encourage people enough to read. I mean, it's almost too simple, because they write every damn thing down. There's no surprises. People go, I didn't know that. Well, no, but they write it all down, so they actually want you to know it. Well, they don't want you to know it, or the media would be putting it out, But they do write it down. You don't read it. And that is the consent they're looking for. Silence is consent, as far as they're concerned. So they write it all down. You don't read it. You're silent. You consented. And that's damned unfortunate that we find ourselves in that position. Now, some of these other Paul Martin, now here's a guy, Walter L. Gordon, lived from 1906 to 1987. He was a Canadian accountant, businessman, politician, and writer. I got to look more into this guy. Now, he was born in Toronto, educated at Upper Canada College and the Royal Military College of Canada in Kingston, Ontario. Upon graduation, he joined the family accounting firm of Clarkson, Gordon and Company in 27. And during World War II, he served in the Bank of Canada and the Federal Ministry of Finance. In 46, he chaired the Royal Commission on Administrative Classification in the Public Service. Now, this is the first guy that now, he ended up in the Order of Canada, but he had a few problems with what was going on here. Now, this is another Bilderberger, or a Bilderberg attendee. From 55 to 57, Gordon chaired the Royal Commission on Canada's Economic Prospects. The Commission's reports issued in 56-57 expressed concern about growing foreign ownership in the Canadian economy, particularly in the resource sector, and made recommendations to redress the problem. The themes raised in the reports were revised by Gordon in his government career. In 62 federal election, he was elected to the Canadian House of Commons as a Liberal. He was Minister of Finance from 63 to 65 and President of the Privy Council. Now, the first guy that I mentioned from 54 or 55 was a clerk of the Privy Council. This guy was the president of the Privy Council. Now, what is the Privy Council? The Privy Council is the Queen's Council. Who's the Queen? The Queen is a corporation. Okay, and that corporation is the head of state of the Canadian corporation. But what kills me about the Privy Council is that, and this is why I don't understand why people can't wrap around their brain that these politicians don't represent them. The Privy Council, those who enter the Privy Council, take an oath of secrecy for life to the Queen, which is a corporate entity. And these people basically are bound to their oath of secrecy. They're bound to their continued work for the corporation long after they're out of politics. They're still working in the background, pushing the agendas. But this particular guy here, I think this is the guy. Yeah, now today, if you call yourself a nationalist, you're immediately a Nazi, a white supremacist, a bigot, a racist. You're every negative term that they can throw at you if you call yourself a nationalist. Now, this particular gentleman, Walter, he had some questions about nationalism. And he kind of didn't get along with Pearson. In 1962, so he was president of the Privy Council from 1967 to 1968 in the government of Prime Minister Lester Pearson. He was noted for his economic nationalism and his support for new social programs. Gordon disagreed, often sharply, with Pearson over the significant expansion in federal expenditures and the decline of sound financial management in Pearson's second administration, which began in 1965. The long friendship between the two men, which had begun in the mid-30s, gradually unraveled. Well, Pearson was a sold-out internationalist, where Gordon considered himself a nationalist. So over time, their friendship went to hell in a handbasket. But then it gets weird here because Gordon supported Pierre Trudeau's winning 1968 bid for the Liberal leadership after Pearson announced his retirement in 1967. Trudeau, once he became Prime Minister, invited Gordon to join his cabinet in 1968, but Gordon declined over some misgivings about being able to work successfully with Trudeau and decided not to run for office in the June 1968 general election. After leaving politics, he returned to business. He continued to argue for economic nationalist causes. And in 1970, along with Peter C. Newman and the Toronto Star, economist Abram Rosenstein, and University of Toronto professor Mel Watkins founded the Committee for an Independent Canada. Canadian historian Jack Grandestein argues in Yankee Go Home that the CIC helped to create the atmosphere in which Trudeau's government established the Canadian Development Corporation in 1971 to buy back Canada. Had nothing to do with buying back Canada whatsoever. Okay, so, but when you're in the midst of this stuff, and you tend to hear what you want to hear because you're not looking with a long lens. You're inside. Now, he was quite disappointed in Pearson's internationalism. And so, this guy hooking up with the Toronto Star which is not nationalist, and Abraham Rothstein, sounds Jewish to me, and the University of Toronto, and historian Jack Grantenstein, which also sounds Jewish. So Gordon was a nationalist, but looks like a hoodwinked in the end here. But this is about our nation. And if you're not a nationalist, you're an internationalist. And if you're an internationalist, that means you're looking for the demise of your nation. So, the one thing that they fear more than anything else are nationalists. Now, Poland is becoming very nationalistic again. And that's a good thing. And we here in the West must become extremely nationalistic because this is our home. And if you're not prepared to defend your home, then you don't deserve it. And that's the whole idea behind the international programs, the UN and the globalist friends. I mean, everything in this country, everything in the West basically is completely dominated by the United Nations or a branch entity of the United Nations. FAO, the Agriculture Association, controls your food. WHO controls your health. UNESCO controls the education. And it just goes on and on and on and on and on. And we have got to take control of this stuff. So this guy did some work until he figured out that this was, Pearson was an internationalist. And so he tried to correct it, but then they got him moving and agreeing with Trudeau. So this guy ends up Order of Canada. But he's the only one I came across so far that has a nationalist view. All the rest of them are internationalists. And why he quit politics was because he wasn't happy about in the direction this nation was going. Now, let's see. Okay, here's a guy who Bassett, who ended up running CTV, which is media, because I always bring media people over to the Bilderbergers because, well, got to control the media. I got to make sure that the media is punching out the proper message. So as far as government is concerned with Bassett, in 1989, he was appointed to a 3-year term as chairman of the Security Intelligence Review Committee, an independent body that reports to the Parliament of Canada on the operations of Canadian Security Intelligence Service due to the requirements under Official Services Secret Act. Bassett was sworn into the Queen's Privy Council of Canada. So, let's see. He ran unsuccessfully for Progressive Conservative Party. Yeah, so he was never in government. He ran a couple of times for government, never got in. But he still ends up in the Privy Council because what he's involved in is none of your business. You know, it's the Security Intelligence Review Committee and the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, of which you have no business knowing anything about, even though it's your country. Because of the requirements under the Official Secrets Act, in other words, you're not privy to what's going on, in order to make sure that he didn't speak up later on. He was sworn into the Queen's Privy Council of Canada, where you take an oath of secrecy for life. You know, it's really quite pathetic. You know, I'm running in the provincial election, and the Liberal candidate is a history teacher in a high school in Port Elgin, Ontario. And I'm going to have a little bit of fun with him because, well, if he's teaching history, that just is proof that he doesn't know anything about history. He's teaching another history book. And there's nothing of any use in the history book. So I'm going to have a little bit of fun with him. Now, who is this guy? Okay, Donald Fleming, 1905 to 1986, was a Canadian parliamentarian, International Monetary Fund official, and a lawyer. Geez, you can't get much lower than that, can you? Born in Exeter, Ontario, Canada. Elected to the House of Commons in 1945 general election as a Conservative candidate. In 1943 was a candidate in that year's Progressive Conservative Leadership Convention, losing to George Drew. He ran for leadership in 1956, losing to John George Diefenbaker. The Speaker expelled Fleming from the House of Commons during the 1956 pipeline debate that helped lead to the defeat of the Liberal government of Louis Saint Laurent in the general election. Diefenbaker became the next new prime minister, and appointed Fleming to the cabinet and Minister of Finance. As finance minister, Fleming clashed with the government of the Bank of Canada, James Coyne, over monetary policy, and ultimately demanded and Coyne got Coyne's resignation in 1961. In 1962, Fleming became the Attorney General of Canada before retiring in 1963. Turned to politics to seek the PC leadership in 1967. For a third time, becoming seventh, and left politics for good. In later life, he was the governor of the World Bank, an International Monetary Fund official, and chairman of the Bank of Nova Scotia, and a Bilderberger. And I'm still way back in the freaking, I think I only get up into the 50s here. Charles Foulkes, Canadian Army general, born in England. And let's see what we got on this guy. Okay, so he was in the war, did a bunch of crap in the war, and was made a Companion of the Order of Canada, taught at Carleton University, 68, 69, died in Ottawa in 69. His medals and that are on display at the Royal Canadian Regiment Museum in London, Ontario. So yeah, he had quite a war history here. But this is interesting because he was tangled up with His Royal Highness Prince Bertrand who everybody should look up because that's a really nefarious character. And Bilderberger and President, I believe, Bilderberg at some point. I believe it was Bergeron and Prince Philip, I think, who started the what's the name of that outfit that's always yammering on about polar bears? Now this guy here, John Wendell Holmes. This is interesting as hell because it says a lot. No, I'm not exactly sure what year because I've been buzzing around in that list, and it's not where I was ending. But also a Bilderberger. I can't remember if it was late 50s, early 60s, whatever. But he was a Bilderberger. John Wendell Holmes was, again, another Canadian diplomat and academic. Born in London, Ontario, attended the University of Western Ontario, University of Toronto, Master of English at Pickering College, University of London. He joined the Department of External Affairs in 1943 as a temporary wartime assistant. From 1947 to 1948, he was a Canadian and interned to the Soviet Union. In 1950, he was appointed acting permanent delegate to the United Nations. He became Assistant Under-Secretary of State for External Affairs in 1953, where he remained until his retirement in 1960. From 1960 to 1973, Holmes was president, later called Director General of the Canadian Institute of International Affairs, and that's where CIC came from. Okay? A nonpartisan, nonprofit, non-governmental organization for the discussion and analysis of international affairs, another NGO being funded to keep moving the program forward. Holmes was among hundreds of federal civil servants who were targeted by... Now this is interesting because today things have changed. You know? Now, if I told this to... And now we have the government apologizing, the RCMP apologizing, and so on and so forth. Because John Wendell Holmes was among hundreds of federal civil servants who were targeted in an RCMP homosexual witch hunt that intensified in 1959 and continued through the 60s, destroying lives, careers, and families. Now, today, the police are marching in the gay pride parades. They're pushing inclusiveness. They're pushing diversity. So the police now are just another arm of the globalist propaganda. And taking things that were never normal and normalizing them. In 1971 to 1981, he was professor of international relations at York University, Glenton College. From 1967 until his death, he was visiting professor of international relations at the University of Toronto. He was also a visiting professor of history at the University of Leeds in 1979-85. He was the author, this is interesting as well, he was the author of Life with Uncle, the Canadian-American Relationship, and The Shaping of Peace, Canada and the Search for World Order, 1943 to 57. And it was in the 50s that the Reece Commission was kicked up to find out what the hell these tax-exempt foundations were up to. And it was a Sovietization of America, which is a world order, of which John Wendell Holmes who was involved with the Soviets, involved with the United Nations, and the Canadian Institute of International Affairs, writes a book, The Shaping of Peace, Canada and the Search for World Order, 4357, and then 2 volumes, 79 and 82. In 86, he was awarded the Royal Society of Canada's J.B. Trindle Historical Medal in recognition of these volumes. And in 69, he was made an officer of the Order of Canada. He was a fellow of the Royal Society of Canada and the recipient of 10 honorary doctorates. This is your government, people. Okay, this is your so-called government. Now, most Canadians and most Americans and most people in most nations have no clue what's been going on in the background. They just see the puppets in the window dancing and offering things and deceiving you, and all the while implementing the globalist agendas. And we need to come to terms with this. And I'm only getting started in this. Now, you know, Paul Martin was the Prime Minister of Canada. Paul Martin was mentored by Morris Strong, who worked for Rockefeller and the globalists. And they all come out of Power Corp. Now, Paul Martin Sr., Paul Martin Jr.'s father, I don't know how many freaking Bilderberg conferences he attended, but I keep seeing his name popping up. You know, and Paul Martin Jr. attended Bilderberg. Jean Chrétien, I believe Harper did. And so did Lester B. Pearson and others. All working, Pierre Trudeau, all working to destroy the nation that we built. I mean, none of these politicians, none of these global affairs people ever lifted a finger to build anything in this nation. Their job is the job of the manipulator, the job of the deceiver. And we have been woefully deceived. So, you know, I really invite people to grab that list. It's a pretty extensive list. But, you know, you can breeze it. And then if you do see something that, a name, look it up. Find out who these people are. Because this has been going on for a very, very long time. Now, I'm just going to run through the CIC for a little bit here. This browser will keep running. And it's the Canadian International Council. Yeah, I think I got enough time to buzz through this. The Canadian International Council is Canada's Foreign Relations Council. Is an independent member-based council established to strengthen Canada's role in international affairs. The CIC uses its historical roots, cross-country network, and research to advance debate on international issues across academic disciplines, policy areas, and economic sector. The council is headquartered in Toronto with 15 volunteer-run branches across Canada. CIC branches present CIC members, speaker programs, study groups, conference seminars. Branches are located in Calgary, Edmonton, Halifax, Hamilton, Montreal, Ottawa, North Bay, Saskatoon, Regina, Thunder Bay, uh, Vancouver, Victoria, Waterloo, and Winnipeg. So this network of nonsense is coast to coast. The CIC Foreign Policy Research Program consists of an annual research program, the China Working Group, the Strategic Studies Working Group, the International Relations and Digital Technology Project, and International Journal, the Council's academic publication. CIC's digital media platform, Open Canada, is Canada's hub for international affairs, building on the CIC's mandate to promote discussions on international affairs. The platform is the Canadian venue for those discussions. Not something you ever read about in the newspapers, of course, but the CIC has its roots in 1928, the Canadian Institute of International Affairs. In 32, Exot Reed was appointed as the Institute's full-time national secretary and began organizing annual study conferences where areas could be exchanged, or ideas, could be exchanged. The conferences were largely roundtable discussions. Now, we still have those. If you put in Canadian roundtable discussions, I mean, you're going to come up with so many politicians that you thought were long gone, it'll blow your freaking mind. Okay, and these are the roundtables where they discuss how they're going to move us where they want us, how they're going to end up taking control of all of the resources in our nation, and control every aspect of your life. This is what they do. Roundtable discussions and members of branch study groups were invited to participate. It's like the Canadian Bilderberg Conference. And most of these people that end up at these roundtables were at Bilderberg at one time or another. Reed also, or the Trilateral Commission, started by David Rockefeller in the States, or UN groups. Reed also encouraged expansion on the CIIA's membership and greater public participation in work in the Institute. CIC's first corporate record dates to 1950 with the objective to give attention to Canada's position both as a member of the international community of nations and as a member of the British Commonwealth nations. In October 2007, Jim Bastille, of the former co-CEO of the Canadian Information Technology Company, Research in Motion, brackets BlackBerry, initiated the formation of the CIC as a partnership between CIA and the Center for International Governance and Information think tank based in Waterloo, Ontario. Now, Research in Motion, I forget what the grant was, $30 million or something? Of your tax dollars went to these guys, so they can use that money to do the round tables, so they can move you where you don't want to go. I mean, this is so sad, so terribly sad. So the think tank based in Waterloo that works on global issues in order to create a research base on Canadian foreign policy similar to the American Council on Foreign Relations and the United Kingdom's Royal Institute of International Affairs. In making the announcement, Bastille wrote, CIC will be a research-based, nonpartisan vehicle applying expert and facts-based research to complex issues as the essential foundation for creating effective policy. In November 2007, members of the CIIA voted to become the Canadian International Council, okay, that's in French. In May 2008, the Canadian Institute of Strategic Studies folded its operations into the CIC as the Strategic Studies Working Group. Now, for 2 years running, the CIC was recognized at the Canadian Online Publishing Awards for its work with Open Canada. 2013, the site won the Content of the Year Award, as well as 2 gold medals for Best Online Only Publication and Online Only Article or Series in the Academic and Nonprofit Media category. In other words, They do really good propaganda. Let's see. Projects and working groups include the Strategic Studies Working Group in partnership with Canadian Defence and Foreign Affairs Institute, Arctic Sovereignty and Security Working Group, Border Issues Working Group, Canada and the Americas Project, Canada-Indian Relations Project, the China Working Group, and Energy Working Group. Now, I really like this Border Issues and Working Group, the Border Issues Working Group. What is the border issue? How do we open it? I mean, it is open Canada, right? How do we open the border? That's what they're talking about, right? So who were the governance? The board of directors includes Bill Graham, Chancellor of Trinity College, Perrin Beatty, President and CEO of Canadian Chamber of Commerce, Jen Bastille, Chair of the Board of CIGC, David Bruskin, Director of Center for Military and Strategic Studies, Raymond Krejci, Strategic Advisor, Jody White, Senior Fellow, Norman Peterson School of International Affairs, Doug Horswell, Senior President, Tech Resources, Janice Stein, Director of the Munk School of Global Affairs. Now, Peter Munk just died. Thank goodness for that. He's another one that gets to go on the Piss on Their Graves tour. But Janice Stein, she basically lives over TVO with the other Jew, Steve Paikin, where they do their show from the Munk Center on how to screw you into accepting world governance. It's really quite the group. But this is just one group. I mean, there are all kinds of groups. But the thing that kills me, they have a working group on the borders, and their funding comes, like I said earlier, from their annual dinner, where the Globalist of the Year award is presented. Past recipients include Christine Lagrange, Managing Director excuse me, of the International Monetary Fund, Nagub Saris, CEO of Orascom Telecom Holding. I don't know if that's Indian or what the hell that is. And the founding member of the Free Egyptians Party, a political party founded in the wake of the Arab Spring in 2011. And I said before, George Soros, fund management, Open Society. Now, Canada, the corporation, partnered with the UN Refugee Agency and George Soros. Yet the CIC has a working group on borders. And the whole point of partnering with the United Nations Refugee Agency and George Soros, Open Societies, is to fling our borders wide open. And people got to look at this stuff. And let's see who else we got here. Pascal Lamy, Director General of the World Trade Organization in 2009, is actually Cheng Sui, former Vice Chairman of the 9th and 10th Standing Committee on the National People's Congress of the Republic of China, and Chairman of the China Democratic National Construction Assembly from 2008, and Angel Gurari, Secretary General of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, got the award in 2007. These are all globalists. Now, that should really piss everybody off. I mean, it should seriously tick you off. And if you don't, well, you're already brain dead. Not much else can be done for you. But you got to read this stuff. It's your duty to do so. Because and I'm serious when I say this, you really don't want one of your offspring standing over your grave in, 50 years from now or whatever, and looking down at your grave when they pick up some of this information that you didn't take the time to read, and they read it, or they found it somewhere and they read it, and they understand what our nations could have been and what they ended up being. You don't want your offspring standing over your grave looking down at it going, why the hell didn't you do something when you had the opportunity to do so? And I think that's the biggest lesson that we need to understand. We have a duty. Okay, your life is not about lottery tickets. Your life is not about your particular job. Your life is not really about anything except making this the nation it should be. That is our duty. And I don't want my people laying on their deathbeds going, I really should have done something.
Question everything. Intelligent radio for intelligent people. UCY.TV.
And later on, I'm going to go for an Easter dinner. So take care, everybody. Have a great day.